And I would like to invite you all to join us in this exploration and celebration connecting art and science for our ocean. With me here, I have Alana Lindgren and Kate Moran, who are also going to introduce themselves to you now. So Alana, please go ahead.
Great. Thank you very much, Julia. As Julia mentioned, I'm Alana Lindgren. I'm the acting dean of the Faculty of Fine Arts, and it's my great pleasure to be here with you today. I want to begin by thanking Kate Moran and her colleagues at Ocean Networks Canada for initiating the Artist in Residence program at the University of Victoria. In truth, in fine arts, we have always viewed our scientist colleagues across the campus as a subset of artists because both traditional artists and scientists impact the world through their imaginations. We pose questions, reconceptualize, experiment, and invent. Moreover, scientific discussions about nursery grounds and seascapes and the notion that the ocean is a circulatory system demonstrate an intuitive understanding that metaphors, poetic language, can effectively facilitate the communication of innovative and complex ideas. As we know, the arts can visualize scientific data and help people to make emotional investments in empirical data. But I believe today we will also hear how the arts can inspire modes of thinking that foster new conversations and alliances. So as I conclude, I want to reiterate my thanks to Ocean Networks Canada. Their Artist in Residence program not only gives important opportunities to young artists, it also demonstrates that the arts and sciences are simpatico and that creative collaborations are, quite frankly, crucial for the creation and implementation of solutions to oceans-related problems. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alana. I really love your take on scientists and artists and kind of the commonalities that we share. And I think that's something we're going to be talking about a lot today. So really great to have you. And Kate, I would love to, if you can introduce yourself to us as well.
Yes, thank you, Julia, and thank you for the thanks, Alana. I'm Kate Moran. I'm president and CEO of Ocean Networks Canada. We operate large ocean observatories off the west coast of Canada, along the coastline, in the Arctic and on the East Coast, and we deliver data freely and openly to scientists, the public, and artists as well. It was quite a number of years ago when I realized how important the arts were to science and vice versa. When I co-led an expedition to the Arctic Ocean, it was the first ever expedition to study paleoclimate there. And the leaders, the ship owners and the operators of the ship invited an artist to be with us for the 3 months we were in the Arctic. And after the expedition, he went home to his home country in Germany and then had a show of the art that he created for over a year. And he was able to talk about the science and the discoveries we made in a way that the public could understand, and it became extremely impactful. So when I came to Ocean Networks Canada, I was also keen to actually begin to incorporate art into what we do. And our chief scientist, Kim Juniper, shared that vision with me. And hence we started Ocean Networks Canada's Artist in Residence program and reached out to the University of Victoria Fine Arts program, and they embraced it immediately, and our partnership began. And so now we're proud to be leaders in this world where we're truly changing science, technology, engineering, and math, also called STEM, into STEAM: science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And you'll hear more about the artists that we have worked with, Jol, Colton, and Dennis today, and I'm keen to hear about their work as well. I've seen some of it, but not all of it. And I just want to close by saying we embrace the arts in many ways. When we moved into our new headquarters, Ocean Networks Canada, we commissioned Coast Salish world-renowned artist Luke Marston to actually carve an art piece for that room where we have most of our presentations. And he was able to bring Indigenous knowledge and Ocean Networks Canada's scientific logo together in a very beautiful way. So enjoy the event today, and thank you for hosting it, Julia.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Kate. I also really loved hearing kind of your personal anecdote as well, because I think it is really about those personal connections so much. So I'm going to pass it over once more to you, Alana, for the territorial acknowledgement for our event today.
I'm very pleased to let you know that today's event is coming to you from the University of Victoria, where we acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen peoples on whose traditional territory the University of Victoria stands, and the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanich peoples, whose historical relationships with the land and the ocean continue to this day.
Great, thank you so much, Alana. And now I would also like to ask all of you in the audience to introduce yourselves to us a little bit. So if you're comfortable, we'd love to know from where you're joining us from today. You can just tell us in the Zoom chat, and we'll be using the chat throughout today's event to interact with you a bit more, because we really want to hear from you as well. So yeah, just let us know where you're joining us from today. And while you're doing that, I'm going to introduce you to our first artist, which I'm very excited about. So Colton is an emerging artist who currently resides as an uninvited guest on the Lekwungen territories of Vancouver Island. Exploring environmental data as media, Hash strives to create accessible works for viewers to consider their cultural relationships with nature. He integrates science and technology through an intuitive process, creating interactive works that engage with industrialization and climate change. Hash was the inaugural artist in residence for Ocean Networks Canada, where he worked with scientists to create interactive data art that communicates ecological relationships within the Salish Sea. So welcome, Colton. So great to have you here today. And for the next 10 minutes or so, we'd love to just hear more about your work, your perspectives, and anything else you want to share with us today.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. This is amazing how big of a crowd we have, and from all around the world, it looks like. My name is Colton Hash. I am a settler artist of mixed European descent, and I am currently living on Lekwungen territories on Vancouver Island. I did my undergraduate at the University of Victoria, where I did a combined program in computer science and visual arts, and I also did an environmental studies minor in that program. And currently I am a Master of Fine Arts candidate at the University of Victoria as well. So I lead a multidisciplinary practice, and my recent focus has been on creating interactive data artworks. These are artworks that primarily convey ecological relationships that are informed by scientific understanding, but also integrate concerns from my local community, personal concerns that I have, and also just general questions and topics of interest that I feel like can use further dialogue in public culture and use a bit deeper investigation. I feel like it's pretty clear for me to assert that I am not doing direct science communication, and that my artworks are not to create scientific models. I am wanting to create art to engage with the vast complexities of our world. Primarily, my work is focused on the intersection between our industrial society and the biosphere. I'm concerned about how these relationships on large scales inform each other, and I want to create space for viewers to consider their own relationship to issues such as industrialization and our impacts on nature, but really to allow space for them to make their own connections to issues. I feel like with a lot of these things with the world and everything, considering things like climate change and ecological destruction, people really know that things are out of balance and don't really need to be told how to think, but it's more of having space to come to your own conclusions, having space to talk about this with others is what we're missing. Through my practice, I really strive to uphold multiple ways of knowing, such as emotional, intuitive, and spiritual understanding, just as much as science and logic. And that's another thing that feels out of balance, is this hierarchy of what knowledge systems are legitimized and given focus. Within the context of engaging with our complex world, I recognize some similarities between art and science. I think both of these fields are really good at fostering ongoing dialogues about complex problems and are really hesitant to give definitive answers about these things. And part of that, I think, is really important to embrace uncertainty. It's been really interesting, yeah, reflecting on like COVID and this past year and a half we've just had and are currently in, how all of us had just so many unanswered questions, and there was like everybody looking to scientists and epidemiologists for answers, and them refusing to give definitive answers because, you know, we just didn't know. And being in that space of unknowing is this really uncomfortable, unsettling thing, but that is a really important space to be humble in too. But at the same time, we need to be finding ways to move forward in definitive ways as well. And yeah, just in general, moving between different disciplines, I feel like there's many opportunities. Just having diverse perspectives, new connections can emerge from that. Different people in the room together that wouldn't otherwise be talking to each other. There's just different conversations that happen. And I also feel like if there's individuals who are crossing between different disciplines, various ideas emerge for them as well that are different if they would have just be siloed in their own discipline. And again, I feel like it's really important to uphold multiple ways of knowing within cross-disciplinary practices as well. Personally, I'm interested in visual art as a way to develop mental models of ecological systems. This is informed by some of my conversations with education outreach staff at Ocean Networks Canada about the potential of visual art to kind of spark this imaginative understanding of ecological issues. And even if that initial understanding is wrong, it can be something to at least, you know, get people thinking and get people engaged. And then you can attribute more like precise scientific information once people are engaged in their own way. So a lot of my work, as I mentioned, is very heavily informed by the ecosystem that's surrounding me. I had the immense privilege of living on the Salish Sea at the coast. This is a body of water between Seattle, Vancouver, and Vancouver Island, where I'm located in Victoria. And living here for 5 years is this amazing experience where I was able to experience these like coastal weather systems and cycles of dramatic weather patterns that are influenced by the ocean, and to get to see some of the biological cycles through exploring things like tide pools on the seashore. Also in this area, I was really drawn and kind of captivated by these very large ships that would anchor in the basically in our backyard in the Esquimalt Harbor. Immediately, my attention was drawn to these things as these symbols and like very vital parts of the global economy. And yeah, I was interested to see what kind of goods they were carrying, where they were going to. And then I started considering and thinking about the impacts they have on the ocean. As far as impacts go, part of my motivation and focus around this was centered around the increase of oil tanker traffic, which would be a result of the Trans Mountain Pipeline being completed. This region will see a dramatic increase of oil tankers through the region, which of course there's threat to oil spills. But along this time, there was also a lot of questions about the acoustic impact that these ships have in marine ecosystems. Through this time also, I came to recognize the Salish Sea as a front line of climate change on various fronts. Primarily, ocean acidification is an issue that's already impacting local economies and local communities and ecosystems. But also for multiple weeks through past summers, we've just been blanketed in smoke from California, northern BC. Yeah, just during these times, it's been pretty surreal to be by the ocean where I'm so used to these really strong weather patterns coming from the Pacific and just like pushing everything away, but just having this really dead stagnant air where and having some of the worst air quality in the world. And still within this time, there are these like oil tankers moving through this area and continuing to feed into the anthropogenic sources of climate change. And so these kind of experiences within this ecosystem are a huge motivation and impetus for me to create art to try to process some of these feelings. So around this time, I was honored to be selected as the inaugural artist in residence for Ocean Networks Canada, where I consulted with scientists about issues they were studying, and from these conversations would emerge various ideas for projects, and I would create projects, then communicate these back to the scientists I talked with to get more information and kind of like refine these to be a bit more accurate. One of these works, Acoustic Turbulence, shows images of various ships traversing through the Salish Sea, and with interactive controls, viewers can move up and down in the water column, and when you move below the water, you see a visualization of the sounds these ships produce, as well as hear a real sound recording of a matching ship. So you get this association of the different types of ships that are passing through the region, and also the wide variety of sounds that ships can make depending on their size, their speed, and how well they're maintained. Extending from this kind of field of research, I worked on another project, Prevalent Echoes, which is to try to create a representation of the spatial impact that all of these ships cumulatively have in the region. So each ship has an acoustic footprint that spreads out for kilometers depending on its speed and its size. And these overlap in some regions and bounce off different islands and others that are blocked by land masses. And I'm interested with this kind of work of just kind of getting a sense of how our society as a whole interacts with this ecosystem that is the Salish Sea as a whole, and through ways of using it as a transportation corridor for global shipping, as well as ferry routes, and just considering the impact that would otherwise be unseen. Both of these works can be viewed online, as well as a few other data visualization works. I'm just going to drop a link in the chat that you can bookmark and check out later if you want. I created an interactive gallery to integrate some of these in a online exhibition that you can see. And all of these were created to be extremely efficient to run on basically any computer and be widely accessible. So the last artwork I want to briefly talk about is resonant disintegration. I created this metal whale sculpture, which is a life-size model of an adolescent killer whale. I created this out of sheet metal, and it was light enough for me to actually be able to carry on my shoulder, and I brought it out into a local bay near where I lived in the Salish Sea as somewhat of a performative gesture, but also immersing it in seawater. It immediately started to rust as soon as I took it out of the water. And this rust, to me, kind of symbolizes some of the contamination that's in the ocean, symbolizes things like ocean acidification, but also just binds this material to this specific body of water. And as an immersive installation, this sculpture is suspended in a gallery space along with a speaker and a contact microphone located inside of the sculpture, which is used to create a feedback loop that makes the sculpture emanate its own sound, which is reflective of the vocalizations of cetaceans, and is also playing underwater engine noise recorded from passing vessels. And above this sculpture is a projector projecting regional climate data for the next 100 years of this region, showing variables such as precipitation and ocean water temperature and air temperature, things that affect the entire ecosystem and the food sources of salmon for the orcas. And this whole installation is created as a meditative space for viewers to be present and really just consider their own personal relationships to local marine organisms, but also to reflect on our civilization's relationship with large-scale ecosystems as a whole. So yeah, those are the works I wanted to briefly share today. I will show a video of this work so you can get a feeling of this space. But yeah, for now, I will pass it back over to Julia. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks so much, Colton, for sharing with us sort of not only your journey as an artist, but also really, I guess, your personal journey with the environment. And I really loved what you said about, creating art that really allows the viewers to immerse themselves in the environment, because that's what we're also going to do now with you in the audience and all of us together. So for the next minute or so, we're going to watch Colton's video clip, and in that time, I want to invite you to really just immerse yourself and kind of simply focus on whatever shows up for you. And while you watch and afterwards, I'll ask you to share what you kind of see, sense, or feel in the Zoom chat with us. So yeah, Colton, what exactly do you want us to think about while watching your video?
So yeah, I want to people just to kind of reflect on this idea that we have a relationship as individuals to everything in the ocean, all life, the ocean itself as an entity, but that also our communities and our civilization as a whole and humanity as a whole also have relationships to the ocean and ecosystems as a whole. And thinking about this in very broad terms and anthropomorphized terms, if that suits you, to just think about what the ocean or what living things in the ocean might experience from their end of our relationship with them.
So if there's anything, any images that came to you, anything that you sensed or felt while watching Colton's video, if you can share it in the chat with us, that would be really great to, also take part in your experience. And while you're doing that, you can just keep the responses going. I'm going to introduce you to our second artist, Jol Thoms. So Jol is an artist and researcher based in London in the UK. His works cross and reconfigure boundaries between the ineffable, the cosmological, and the scientific, using strategies from quantum field theory, the environmental humanities, feminism, and decolonial studies. He has participated in exhibitions, fellowships, and residencies internationally, and is the founder of the Radio Amnion project, commissioning and transmitting artists' messages of care 2.5 kilometers in and to the Pacific Ocean. So, hi Jol, so nice to have you here today.
Hi, so I'm Jol Thoms and I'm in London, UK at the moment. I'm a settler Canadian, but I've been working in Europe for the last decade or so. Thanks for your time today. I want to say hi to my mom, who I think is somewhere out there watching from Ontario. And I'm going to make sure that this is operating just right for me. Great. So one pillar of my practice works with video installation, specifically dealing with planetary scale sensing infrastructures in the domain of new experimental physics, where planetary bodies like ice shelves, deserts, lakes, mountains, these historically sacred and knowing bodies meet technological infrastructures in the construction of new forms of knowledge. And I create moving images and sound and sculptures and installation, and I write experimental theory. My practice thinks environment and ecology through physics landscapes, or what I call landscape laboratories. And I work with these assemblages to reorient ideas of nature, technology, cosmos, and the problematic category of the human. And I'm looking for new relationships, pluralities, and multivocalities as modes and methods to address the complex challenges we face in the 21st century. around ecology and inequality. So this means also locating agency outside of the sphere or the spectrum of the human in the non and more than non-human worlds. I am specifically a neutrino particle artist. So in Antarctica, for example, there's a cubic kilometer detector buried more than 2 kilometers into the ice shelf. And there they use the frozen element of water to detect imperceptible neutrino particles. And there's this amazing adventure where they go deep underground to see deep into space, troubling notions of scale, what nature and technology are, their kind of boundaries. And you can kind of see the Eiffel Tower down there as giving you some idea of the scale of this kind of matrixial telescope that's there in the ice. So my emphasis in these works is on the materiality of the technologies, their embeddedness in landscapes. These types of sites are generative for thinking about the implications of quantum physics for our ideas of environment and society. And I work with these sites as modes of thought and as places where nature itself is explicitly knowing, lively, and performative. In Siberia, which I visited in winter 2017, there's a similar telescope within the oldest, largest freshwater lake in the world, Lake Baikal. And there again, the water meets these imperceptible particles. So in all of these images from this film that I made there, you're actually looking at all different orientations through and of water itself. And so physicists in the winter drive out on the thick ice, cut holes in it, and then submerge optical equipment deep into the water. And I'm going to show a brief clip from this video, A Borderline Conception, lying at the extreme edge of the world of appearances at the end of my talk. I also run and lead interdisciplinary workshops and field trips with artist and physicist students interested in new forms of knowing and being together without epistemic hierarchies. And in this corner, you can see there's a small quote from Isabel Stengers, which I think is a very well-known philosopher in feminist science studies and science studies. And I think it really helps kind of pull everything together here. So she writes, "What matters is creating new forms of togetherness between practices, both scientific and non-scientific, finding relevant ways of thinking together." Here are some of the students from Munich, physicists and artists together. We went to a mountain laboratory outside of Rome, where I produced a film around a mountain that holds the coldest object in the observable universe. But the mountain is a very essential part of this laboratory. So we need to know the mountain to know the laboratory, because the mountain is essential to the unique operations that happen there. In Canada at the moment, I'm part of a touring exhibition called Drift Art and Dark Matter, initiated by the MacDonald Canadian Astroparticle Institute, the Agnes Etherington Art Center, and the 2015 Nobel Prize for Physics winning laboratory called Snow Lab, that will come to British Columbia to the Belkin Gallery at UBC in the fall. And my project, Enland, reads the site of Snow Lab and its many hidden layers and agents to discuss the overseen elements that are necessary for prize-winning experiments and creating new knowledge of nature. Sometimes I do other things where I situate science and technology in deeper times. So here there's an octagonal mirror holding the first working hand current calculator by an astronomer priest named Philip Matthias Hahn. And it's being inspected by this Industry 4.0 kind of revolutionary robot that can sense humans. Or in the case of clean nuclear fusion energy, or infrastructures who refer to harnessing the power of stars, I locate the origin and trajectory of pre-modern natural philosophy in the more animistic and spirited tendencies of the alchemical tradition and the mysticism of the 12th century polymath abbess Saint Hildegard of Bingen, because I'm interested in rethinking a responsible scientific world that does not create or uphold an indifferent universe divided into hierarchies, but rather one that is alive with a cosmic organicism that we can commune with in caring and responsible ways. I'll continue on. Finally, I'm getting to Radio Amnion, the project that I'm doing together with Ocean Networks Canada and the Technical University of Munich. So this is, Radio Amnion and the SFB 1258 Neutrino and Dark Matter group led by the incredible Professor Elisa Rusconi asked me to send art into the ocean with their submerged telescope. So Radio Amnion, Sonic Transmissions of Care within Oceanic Space, sends artists invocations and incantations, sounds and voices deep into the Pacific Ocean, attached to the P1 neutrino telescope at the Neptune Observatory, Cascadia Basin node of Ocean Networks Canada, which is about 300 kilometers from the shore of Vancouver Island, and it's 2.6 kilometers deep. Radio Amnion is a networked sound sculpture and calibration system that invites artists, musicians, composers, poets, and researchers to develop new sonic compositions of love, care, appreciation, gratitude, specifically to and for the water itself, to the ocean itself, to the more than human realms of this very unique ocean planet. And it's supported by the Canada Council for the Arts. So it's attached to a submerged neutrino telescope experiment that seeks faster than light ultraviolet particles. Here's a kind of diagram of what it will eventually look like, but it's in an experimental phase at the moment. But you can see kind of the scale, it's multi-cubic kilometers. And Radio Amnion will be kind of one of those, is one of those little black beads there. And Radio Amnion transmissions occur during each full moon. So it relays these new artist compositions when the tides are high into the water, sending these artists' sensibilities into the hydrological cycles. Recently, Richard Powers, author of the epic arboreal novel, The Overstory, asserted in a podcast interview that art does not begin and end with the human. In 1966, Dionne Warwick sang the Burt Bacharach song, "What the world needs now is love, sweet love, the only thing there is just too little of." The renowned founder of Earth Art, Cuban-American Ana Mendieta, wrote in an artist statement in 1983 that her art is grounded in a belief of a universal energy which runs through everything from insect to human, from human to specter, from specter to plant, from plant to galaxy. And Radio Amnion is kind of resonating with these frequencies. So there is Radio Amnion deep in the celestial waters that meet deep space, irrigating connection, relation between disciplines, practices, and ways of knowing. More than 2 kilometers underwater, entangled and connected in these collapsing space-times as distant astronomical bodies and energies meet and fluoresce in these superluminal blue traces in the water. I've asked all the artists to address their sounds first and foremost, and specifically to the ocean, whatever ocean might mean or hold for them, because it matters what stories tell stories, as feminist science studies scholars Sandra Harding and Donna Haraway repeatedly emphasize. And again, in an age of science denialism and climate destruction, with Isabel Stengers, who we heard from earlier, what matters is the possibility of creating new forms of togetherness. And this is true not only in terms of human societies and disciplines, but also in terms of human and non-human relationships to and with this living earth. You can see also a quote here from Astrida de Monis, a hydrofeminist, who asks, which is a prompt maybe for everyone, how can we cultivate the further proliferation of watery life? How might we account for our differences while demanding interconnection? What are our specific responsibilities as human bodies of water? So anthropologist Eduardo Cohn refers to learning to think like a forest after a decade of living with indigenous communities in the global South, about learning from a community with specific ties to a place, to a jungle. He wrote, my mind could return to being a part of the world. My mind could return to being a part of a larger mind. My thoughts about the world could once again become part of the world. And Radio Amnion imagines our ocean planet as a mind we can return to as well for the ecological health and well-being of it. So, okay, yeah, it's about to launch June 24th to 26th. The first transmission will be going from Labida, Sabungu, and Paravi Kachavivi. And the website will be launching at that time, and you'll be able to go to the website. You'll be able to hear the first composition, and it will be transmitted into the water simultaneously. So all new subsequent compositions will also occur during the full moon. So you can go back each time during the full moon. So that might be hard to keep track of. So I just want to mention that you can follow us on Instagram, or you can sign up through the website for a newsletter. The last slide just said who the other artists involved are. So it's Labida and Paravi, Abbas Sahedi, Margarita Mendez, Samuel Hertz, Caitlin Berrigan, Andrea Zarza, Josefa Entiam, and Marichin Dans for the moons of 2021. Thank you. I hope I didn't go over time. Thank you for your time with me today. And I want to pass it back to co-founder of Virtual Blue Decade, Julia Jung.
Thank you, Joel. And I'm also very impressed with your song. And I just really love the approach that you take with your work and how it really seems to take us the kind of the edges of thought and perception, but always going there together. And I think that's really beautiful. And we're also together now going to have a chance to further immerse ourselves in your work. So we're going to be playing a video by Jol. Thanks so much, everyone, for sharing your experience with us. It's really great to see. And again, you can keep them going while I introduce our third artist, Dennis Gupa, to you. So, as an artist in residence of Ocean Networks Canada and the Faculty of Fine Arts, Dennis is grateful to collaborate with ocean scientists and artists to create interdisciplinary choral songs for a music theater on and about the ocean through Tanaga, an indigenous Philippine poetic form rendered into musical pieces. His collaborative work explores issues around climate change and meditates on our collective commitment in making sure that our ocean and the non-human entities that inhabit it are healthy, respected, and loved. And already I so love your bio, Dennis. Every time I read it, I just feel very touched. And same for you. For the next 10 minutes or so, we're really excited to hear more about your work.
Thank you, Julia. And thank you, of course. And of course, thanks to the Ocean Networks Canada and the Faculty of Fine Arts for having me as your second artist in residence. I am pleased to share with you a fragment of my dissertation on Philippine indigenous marine knowledge, climate change, and applied theater. I have been sharing this project in different events, and I try to always focus on the persistence of Philippine local knowledge in its evolution and growth as it continues to face the intense overflow of globalization. The ocean is an integral part of my artistic and academic life. I was born and raised in an archipelagic country, the Philippines, which is comprised of 7,641 islands. My ancestors are fishers, boat makers, and caretakers of an island in the central Philippines. My great-great-grandfather was a shaman, keeper of traditional fishing knowledge, and custodian of Minasangay Island. When Super Typhoon Yolanda hit the Philippines in November 8, 2013, it claimed more than 6,000 lives, and Minasangay Island was decimated. Super Typhoon Yolanda is known to be the strongest typhoon ever recorded in the recent history of climate disaster in the world. In my doctoral project, I explored oral stories, ancestral environmental knowledge, ocean-human relationship, and climate change within island communities that have long histories of disaster. As an applied theater practitioner and theater director, I ask how applied theater can deploy local disaster stories and mobilize indigenous ecological knowledge in climate justice discourse that are not given significant value in climate change conversations. During my dissertation field work in 2018 and 2019, I was able to collaborate with local elders in Tubabao Island, Eastern Samar, Philippines, who introduced me to their traditional fishing methods that animate their indigenous oceanic knowledge in ecological stewardship and people's creativity. In this talk, I wish to highlight the local community's embodied knowledge of mathematics, Fisher's ability for practical innovation, and creativity manifested in the use of panggal. Panggal is a fishing tradition that employs a contraption which is also called panggal, made of bamboo strands. The origin of panggal underscores the relationship shared by human, ocean, and typhoon. According to Tatay Frank Abuyen, my informant and my collaborator, the fishers of Tubabao Island knew about the existence of this fishing contraption from a neighboring island. The first set of this fishing device came to his community after a typhoon struck Central Philippines in the early 1970s. It was hurled into their island. Lying on the edges of their seashore, the fishers of Tubabo Island collected these fishing contraptions because they wanted to learn how these devices were crafted. They began dismantling the bamboo strands carefully, and they assembled them back from its original structure. I saw Tatay Frank crafted this fishing device one morning. Tatay Frank told me that there are 6 things to make this device. The moment he weaves the bamboo strands, one would see the dexterity of his hands. They move with grace, strength, and sophistication. He knows how to manipulate the stiffness of these bamboo strands and turn them into perfect angles of 4 sides. Nothing mysterious in the workings of his hands. His knowledge of geometry is practical, and his mathematics is embodied. Tatay Frank did not finish his secondary schooling, but he is the most articulate teacher of panggal making and fishing method in his island. How do they use this device in catching their fish? The fisher releases the panggal into the open sea without any buoy. Once the fisher arrives on the open sea, he finds a spot on the water. And from his boat, he will identify 2 markers, or what they call tigaman, located on the landforms. For example, a tip of a mountain as the first spot, the coconut tree on the opposite mountain as the second spot, and the third spot is where the fishing contraption will be dropped, where he is currently located. After 24 hours or 2 weeks, the fisher will return to the same spot where the panggal was released and refer to the 2 markers and begin triangulating them with the spot where the panggal was released. Here, a process they call escuala, or triangulation, is used to visualize the alignment of the 3 spots through a geospatial memory in retrieving the fishing trap. The fishers that I met in this island community are keen readers of signs. Obviously, they don't need a GPS in locating their fish trap in the open ocean. Panggal illustrates the efficiency of indigenous knowledge and practice. And I argue that this local marine environmental knowledge in fishing is technically sound, sustainable, and holistic. The history of panggal's arrival in Tubabo Island and the local fishing knowledge in utilizing this fishing device allow me to think of how knowledge can evolve with disasters and how typhoon can become agents of creative renewal. Through these fishing traditions, I conceptualize a performance method of applied theater creation based on the 6 steps of crafting a panggal that Tatay Frank taught me. This performance method expands the practice of applied theater as a post-disaster mitigative response approach that draws on local ocean knowledge. In times of climate crisis, where extreme weather events like super typhoon continue to enter in island communities, applied theater can contribute in the cultivation of people's creativity after disaster. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dennis. I'm so inspired by your work, and also for you, of course, we have a video that we would love to share where you can get some more insight into Dennis' work. And again, I'd invite you to share whatever comes up for you in the chat with us, and we'll be going to the word clouds right after that.
My relationship with the ocean is its invitation for stewardship. I think of the ocean as part of my family, part of my kinship. And every time that I think of the Pacific, I think of how I can respond to the call of making it a place where we could respect, we could experience its beauty, but also at the same time understand that it has its own life and it could be powerful. An applied practitioner is an artist who go to the community and collaborate with community to create platforms for them to tell their stories, because a lot of these people that we collaborate have been marginalized by social, political, and environmental circumstances. So we are an artist who allows this collaboration to blossom. My favorite thing about doing theater is its ability to gather people, and in this gathering we have the privilege and the gift to reimagine our future through storytelling and through the energy of creation, to come together and see the possibility of creating songs and stories and dances. And through this work, it's a gift to be able to see the future. In the Philippines, I was able to co-direct an international theater festival and conference where we invited scholars from Canada and the Philippines to come together and to talk with policymakers and fishers and artists. And we were all in one room trying to unpack the impact of climate crisis in local communities. And through this conference, we were also creating performances about the policies and future policies that could probably help our local communities. As an artist in residence at the Ocean Networks Canada, I was given an opportunity to have a dialogue and to listen to this ocean scientist and allow other artistic collaborators to come in so that we can translate this conversation into songs and poetry. I am deeply, deeply grateful for the education that I've been receiving in this unceded territory, in this traditional land. And it is beyond my imagination to have this kind of intellectual and artistic growth. I would like to understand how I can give back and see the power and potential of care and compassion so that we can all come together and have an equalizing, a shared life in this planet.
Again, thank you all so much for sharing your experience with us. And at this point during our time together, and before taking a look at those word clouds, I would like to invite you all to just get a glass of water and just sip it, taste it, just take a moment to breathe and to really connect to the feeling of how we're all connected to the water, no matter where you are right now. And yeah, thank you, everyone. Time to kind of come back together. And now let's actually take a look at those word clouds that we have generated together, or that we generated from your reaction. So we're going to start off with the first one. Here it is. And Dennis, actually, I'm really curious what your thoughts are on seeing the word cloud, and I would love to hear a really brief comment with your reaction.
Yes, thanks, Colton. As I look at this image and the words that made this image, I think of integration, of holism, of the work in that kind of integration. That it needs labor, it needs imagination. It needs a kind of physicalization as what you are doing as a visual artist. So it's not just abstract. It is a labor of love, a body of thought, of mind and hands of an artist and a scholar like you.
Oh, That was really beautiful, Dennis. And yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of contrast sort of to your work, Colton. And now let's take a look at the word cloud that came up in response to Joel's work.
Yeah, I really appreciated just seeing the responses for Joel's work. I feel like connecting to your presentation, thinking about the Earth as having, you know, this animated life force flowing between it and having, you know, agency and like cognition or intelligence of its own is really reflected a lot by the words people are saying. I think there's this amazing wonder and inspiration of like looking at this microcosm of these small spaces in the Earth that we don't really think about. And in that is reflecting our entire universe, but it's also reflecting our own minds. And I think that video, especially in your work, shows that in a really welcoming and uplifting way. But at the same time is this a bit like kind of haunting and eerie, as some people pointed out too.
Thank you, Colton. Yeah, I think it's definitely very taking, kind of just a lot of intensity to your work, Joel. So we have one more word cloud to look at in response to Dennis' work. And Joel, I'm wondering if you can give us a brief comment with your reaction.
Hi there. Dennis's work is incredible, and I think everyone recognizes that, and you can see it in the chat. I think, you know, he was talking about these forces of nature and the way that they're teaching and have taught communities with the Pangal. And I think Dennis is himself a force of nature, and his work is absolutely inspiring. And I just want to know more and witness it in real life. And yeah, it's just incredible. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joel. Yeah, I think definitely all of your works are just kind of inspiring in like very different ways. And yeah, now we're actually coming to the point of this event where we're going to have more of an open conversation with the three of you on all these themes that we've been talking about. So for the next sort of 15-20 minutes or so, we have a time to go into a bit more depth. And we'd also love to hear questions from you in the audience or comments to connect a bit more with you. So you can just post them in the Zoom chat and I'll be picking them up. But to start us off, I have a question actually. So Colton, I was really struck by how you talked about navigating uncertainty, and I really loved how you mentioned these commonalities between science and art. But I feel like often there's still a tension in a way between establishing facts and recognizing multiple realities. So I'm wondering, how do you experience and sort of navigate this tension in your daily life?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it is very interesting moving between these realms, and there's so many opportunities and there's this huge interest for cross-disciplinary work, but at the same time, yeah, there's a lot of pitfalls. From the art side, I feel like I'm always being interrogated about even just having data present at all is then seen as me trying to tell people how to think, or seeing something as absolute truth or literal truth, where I'm, you know, interested in using data just as any other creative medium, is just another medium of expression to communicate. And then on the scientific side too, I still feel like there's this tendency for like maybe a bit of an outcome or something, or a bit of a connection to the issues that are being studied, and you know, to have that a rooted relevance that way, and to maybe be a bit more like practical. But yeah, and I mean, for me, again, I'm coming from this at a very personal perspective, where I'm just one person in the world trying to be engaged, and working with art is a way that like keeps me engaged and keeps me inspired about the future. I mean, especially as a young artist who's very aware and concerned about climate change, like making art about the complexities of the world is a way, and that being a way for me to have conversations with people I would never have these conversations with otherwise is a really important way for me to have purpose and to continue forward with hope. But yeah, I'm curious to hear about, Jol, your experiences kind of crossing this divide within a more scientific context.
Hi, thanks for that. Yeah, it's a bit of quite a challenge. I think we all recognize that, not just like imagining how you can hold different cosmologies simultaneously, but also just working in the field of science as an artist, because oftentimes there are everyone has different desires and needs and things like that, and there are these kind of epistemic hierarchies that occur due to, you know, the different roles that we all play in these cultures and societies. But there is an urgency in telling other stories, new stories, better stories, and I think the art science collaboration can really be a kind of harbinger of that possibility for responsible storytelling, what is responsible science, what is responsible art, what is a responsible citizen of the world, what is a responsible water body. Yeah, I think also I would like to ask Yulia a question, because I know it's like a surprise question, but you've also worked in Sri Lanka and Kenya with communities. So I feel like there's quite a relationship between you and possibly Dennis as well. And maybe you can just tell us a little something about that. Yulia, sorry to put you on the spot. This wasn't in the rehearsal.
That's okay. I guess it's about coping with uncertainty, right? So yeah, I guess my background is I have been really interested in kind of community-based conservation, and yeah, have worked with communities in Kenya and in Sri Lanka. And I've very often thought about my role and the appropriateness actually of, you know, being someone from Germany, even working with communities, and like thinking a lot about what is even a possible contribution that I could make here. I think that's sort of the big issue that I struggle with, is what is there about me that I could add? And I'm actually really curious to hear what your perspective is on this. Dennis, obviously you work in the Philippines, sort of very much where you're from, but there's also lots of other people from everywhere working in the Philippines. And do you experience a tension there sometimes, or how has it been with kind of the people you collaborate with?
Yeah, yes, a lot of tensions indeed, but these tensions are also necessary to be able to embrace the value and the significance of the work, and see the tensions are sources of understanding why there's tensions. And as I expand my understanding of the world, these tensions are also coming from the colonial experiences of the people and their struggle to claim their voices. So as an outsider, insider also, because I'm a Filipino, entering a site that is not my community, I vacillate in these two extremes. But I believe the silver lining is relationship, and they would see that. They would see the integrity of your work through your yearning for relationship for people, for the land, for the water, and it will shine, it will glow.
That's really beautiful, because yeah, that's what I always think in the end, that it is about developing empathy and connection in a way. And I was always really struck by, I guess, Colton and Jol, your work is more about maybe non-human sources of data, to say it in a very crude way. Like, I wonder, have you ever, like, is that something you think about? Kind of like you talked about this tension of using data, Colton, but where it comes from, sort of?
Yeah, I think, well, yeah, a few things come to my mind with that. I feel like I have thought about I mean, there's various different data points, and data and like science and information gathering is like so incredibly politicized. I mean, something that came to me, and I had a conversation with a past roommate who was a refugee, was asking about, potentially visualizing migration data and stuff like that. And then I've also just like seen some animations like that can very easily be read as like xenophobic, showing people from one region going to another. And, even though that's a part of climate change and that's a part of the complexity we're facing, not being like really rooted and not being able to go to these places, get the full story, be on the ground and like actually have a holistic sense of understanding. I feel like as an individual, it is not my place to be really like working with those kind of data that have these really serious political implications that could actually influence people's lives. And with that kind of work, I mean, I think it's so incredibly important to be collaborating. And I know there's a lot of different organizations that are doing like really good work and actually are the ones collecting data. Because I don't know, otherwise it's like data itself is a lens that is this kind of very top-down hierarchical way of understanding and is this kind of cold presentation of relationships that, have a lot of meaning and aren't just data points, like it's actually people's lives. And similarly with the ecosystem too, which I mean is, from my perspective, that's actually something I'm interested in presenting, is this cold top-down perspective as a perspective of industrialized society and how it relates to the earth. But in terms of communities and nations and cultures relating to each other, it's maybe not the best approach.
Yeah, I guess even the word data is just a very strange word because we use it in many different contexts. So yeah, we do have a question actually now for you, Jol. So the question is, when you develop a landscape laboratory, do you pre-plan some ideas or do you visit the landscape and sort of see what it needs and what it wants to say? And how does that process look like?
Yeah, that's great. So that's a really good question. And I guess it's a question of methods. I refer to having an experimental spirit, which is from this science philosopher named Hans-Georg Reinberger. And that experimental spirit is in both science and arts. And it's a kind of openness to what materials or situations or events do. So instead of going somewhere and having an kind of encampment of methods and it implies that you already know what you're searching after. Whereas when I go to a landscape laboratory, it's more of a derive, which is a kind of wandering and being influenced by the landscape or other people or situations or the temperature, and really following an intuition. So the process can be pretty wild. It's also usually in this context, you only have a very limited amount of time. So I guess normal filmmakers would like to know their shots, but you're only arriving for the first time and then kind of very restricted about, and oftentimes very restricted what you can do. In the case of the Technical University of Munich with Elisa Risconi and SFP 1258, we've been having these ongoing conversations for years now. So that's how something like Radio Amnion emerges, because of discussions we've been having and trust that's been built and things like that. It's quite a special situation.
That's really beautiful. I really love this mix of, I guess, having an idea, but exploring and having to explore. And we have a very interesting question in the chat here. We just have a few more minutes, so maybe there's only time for a brief comment. And so the question is, do all the three of you identify as male, or how, or does your gender, influence your work? And I realize that's quite a sensitive question potentially, and also a very large question. So, and we do have time kind of for a brief comment each, but if you don't want to or would rather say something else, that's totally fine. But I think it is a very interesting question. Colton, you're nodding very excitedly, so I'm gonna let you go first.
I just actually nod just like all the time in response to everything. But I mean, yeah, I don't really make like a lot of my work is actually just like at a completely different level than like individual human perspectives too, which is a weird thing. But yeah, I mean, I just like try to acknowledge my gender, and I think within the field of art and science, it's still very like much so dominated by like white men, and within that, try to, you know, like not expect or not demand space and try to be like gentle. But I mean, it's also something just like trusting that if I'm like have, you know, care and intuition, that I can like also be heard and be a part of the conversations too.
That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Well,
Joel or Dennis, yeah, would you?
thanks. Yes, I think that my gender is like the water. It's fluid. And if I won't think of that, my work will not be successful. You know, I think that we have to, the issues of our time calls for intense fluidity, of accommodating, of even thinking of ourselves as water, you know? Sometimes I would perform like with the fishers, I would perform like them for me to relate with them. Right? When I talk with fishers, the women who would sell the fish in the marketplace, I become like them. You know?
That's really beautiful and really powerful, and I can relate a lot to that. I guess fluid experience as well. And Joel, I love your your reaction. I'm wondering if you want to add a verbal comment to that reaction.
Yeah, I mean, we're living in a quite amazing time, and a lot of the work that we're doing and talking about here is kind of non-binary. We don't believe in the mind-body split. We don't believe in the inside-outside. We don't believe in holding the world at a distance and having a cold gaze on it. We're in the world. We're of the world. The world is contingent. The world is fluid. The world is non-binary. So that's kind of the take and position. Even though I'm a cisgendered male performing, I don't necessarily also believe in the socialization practices of girls and boys, because I think it's extremely violent, so I'm very aware of it in my work as well.
That's yeah. Thanks so much, all the three of you, for sharing your perspectives. I really appreciate your kind of openness and vulnerability here. And now we're almost actually at the end of our time. So I would still like to invite each of you to just give a really brief kind of last comment, maybe on this event today, maybe highlighting actually how has tonight changed anything for you? Is there something new that you gained or thought about? Yeah, Colton, I'm just gonna start with you again, if that's okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I try to think about this a lot and hold this a lot too. But I mean, I feel like there's this really important balance that we need to strike between like looking at some of the things that are like troubling and problematic and just face this, but at the same time be holding space for love, community care, resilience, growing, and support. And that's one of the things I really love about Dennis's work. Does that really well, because and yeah, speaking of binary, sometimes it's either like too much of one or too much of the other, but we need to hold all that stuff together in moving forward with the future.
That's really beautiful. Thank you. Dennis, I'm wondering, would you like to follow on with your reflections of today?
Yes, I like to thank everybody. It's been an honor to be here, sharing this space with you, Julia, Jol, and Colton, and the wonderful institutions at the University of Victoria, Ocean Networks Canada, and the Faculty of Fine Arts, all our mentors who are dedicated in mentoring us and giving us this important enlightenment that we need as we go to every community that we would like to work, because our work is so intense. And I feel that what I'm picking up right now here is the invitation for working together. Whatever that we envision for the future, it is about this kind of an integration between the human and the non-human. And that is important, I believe, because as we embrace the responsibility of taking care of our ecology, I also thinking that the value of taking care of those people who doesn't have a lot of agency, who doesn't have a lot of resources to build themselves after the typhoon. So this is about a reflection of social justice. In times of global warming, there are communities, indigenous communities and urban poor communities who are being ravaged by the intensity of climate crisis. So I think it's both. As we accept the love for our ecology, we also have to think of those people who are been marginalized many times because of intense industrialization and intense love for commerce. So these are thoughts that's coming to me right now.
Thanks so much for sharing that. Yeah, I think social justice is definitely crucial for anything we do and has to be an integral part of that. And yeah, there's just so much yes in me to hearing you say that. And Joel, of course, would love to hear from you as well, sort of a final reflection on today.
But there's no time.
No, there's time
yeah, there's
for a
time.
brief reflection.
Yeah, thank you. Bad joke. But yeah, I don't know. We've been talking a bit critically of science, and of course we do that because we respect and love and recognize the value of science in revealing and showing to us how we need to change. When I say I'm talking kind of about Western societies, our practices, because they're so toxic to atmospheres and to groups and to societies. So these critiques of science are to try to make a better science, to contribute to the idea of thinking, how can science come back to the social, to the society, in ways that might lead to something like an anti-imperial science or respectful anti-colonial engagement of sciences, something like that. And that's something that I'm continuing to think about and work with.
Thanks so much, Joel. Yeah, I guess maybe we didn't say that as clearly, but for me, at least, there's no doubt for my love for science, and I think for this shared love for exploration and discovery in an open, warm, respectful way. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, and thanks so much to the three of you in general for being here today and for joining us. It was so great to experience your work and to hear your thoughts, and I just feel really warm and grateful to have been a part of this. And I also really want to thank all of you in the audience for being here, and especially for sharing your thoughts and experience with us as well. And we would really love to hear more from you and to expand this into a proper conversation, actually. So we want to invite you to share your own art with us. So if you have any ocean art projects or thoughts or anything you would like to share, you can do that by using the hashtag OceanSciArt on Twitter. And we would love to see them and to, really make this a starting point of this larger conversation, considering many different perspectives and learning and growing together. If you want to find out more about our three artists here or get in touch with them, you can follow them on social media, of course, and check out their websites. And we're just putting all this information in the chat for you. And we'd also really appreciate it if you can fill out our questionnaire for this event so we can continue to improve them in the future. And now I would like to end by just reminding us all that this is World Ocean Week. And I hope you've had a really beautiful week of learning and inspiration and celebration, and that we can carry these feelings forward into the future. And in that sense, I also want to invite you all to participate in the UN Decade of Ocean Science, and especially in joining us to creating an inspiring and engaging ocean. Because it seems that the things we need most for this are connection and empathy, both with the ocean and with each other. So let's keep this conversation going to bring together what both science and art can do for us and for our ocean. and to just embrace the many different ways of knowing and being that come along with that. And yeah, that's it. I hope you have a really wonderful rest of your day, wherever you may be. And thanks so much for joining us.